Hola, Madrid. That's all the Spanish I know. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Especially the last few days of weather has just been incredible. Coming from rainy Seattle to have a bit of that Spanish sun has just been wonderful. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit of what we are learning in the world of research. I'm head of research for the Co-Pilot and Future of Work team, as mentioned, and what we do as a team is essentially try to understand what the future of work might look like. We here at Microsoft are privileged that we have access to billions of signals of data, and we are able to look at all of that data and try to get a view of what the future of work might be. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you a bit about. But the way I always like to start my research projects about the future of work is actually by looking a little bit at the past. I'm a big believer that in order to really try to project forward, we have to look backward at history. And so for that, I want to take us through a little bit of an evolution, a little bit of a history of information. And why is information so important? Well, because we all here in this room are information workers. Information is at the heart of what we do. You exchange it, you apply it, you learn from it, and information has gone through a very interesting history, interesting evolution. The very first way we really knew about information was through verbal exchange, right? Back in the caveman days in prehistoric history, we would all sit around the fire and just talk out loud and exchange words by speaking. But then something incredible happened, which is we learned how to write, and we learned how to capture information. And what that meant is essentially we could record it and document it as an artifact. Now, this wasn't very popular with a few people. Plato, this is one of my favorite quotes, Plato thought that writing was very dangerous. He believed that if we learned how to write, then we would not be able to remember anymore, that writing would impair our cognitive abilities. I think we all now know that Plato was wrong. Writing actually helps us remember. Then we learned to distribute information through printing. The printing press was invented, and we were able to not just write information down, but distribute it widely to loads and loads of people. And the printing press wasn't very popular when it was invented either. There were a bunch of people who tried to ban it because they thought, oh my goodness, free access to all of this information, distribution at scale, that's a very scary thing. But we didn't just learn to capture written information, we also learned to capture visual information. And the person who invented the camera was a genius, because essentially, what he enabled to do was to record and document visual information, visual reality. The person who put a camera on every single phone in the world was equally a genius, because he enabled us all to become photographers. Cameras weren't very popular when they were invented either. There was a whole set of artists, of painters and portrait artists who were very threatened by the invention of the camera, because that was their entire job, right? Their entire purpose. Think about it. Before the camera, the only way that you could capture visual information was by hiring a painter to do that. And then along comes the camera and does that more perfectly than a human ever could do. This is one of my most prized possessions. This is a painting of the Suffolk coast, which is where I'm from. The reason that this painting is so important to me is not because it's a perfect representation of the visual image in front of me. It's because it's an interpretation of the Suffolk coastline, an interpretation that moves me. And that's what happened when the camera was invented. All of a sudden, painters, portrait artists, they were liberated from the need to perfectly reproduce what was in front of them. And that's how Expressionism was born, Impressionism was born, all of these art forms that are inherently human that would not have existed without the camera. And then we did another really big thing, a big milestone in the history of information, which is the internet was invented. And we democratized information through the internet. We took all of that information, both written and visual, and we put it online. And we could all access it suddenly with a click of a button. We didn't all of a sudden have to go to a library and check out a book that we needed, right? We could just log online. Now you can guess where I'm going with this. The internet wasn't very popular when it was invented either. This is an amazing read. I would highly recommend you go look at this report. It's from 1995. I was just a kid when this report was published. I won't tell you what exact age I was, but it's a bit of a throwback. This research report published by Pew Institute, essentially, they went out and they surveyed hundreds of thousands of Americans. I'm sorry, this is American data, not European. And they tried to ask them, what are your impressions about the internet? And these are some of the most interesting sound bites. Few see online activities as essential to them, and only email is used with any regularity. This is the same report that said most people only check their email once a day. Can you imagine only checking your email once a day? Right now, I'm having anxiety because my phone's right there and I need to check my email. Also, consumers have yet to begin purchasing goods and services online. No one thought we would put our credit card details online. And we didn't think we'd move away from newspapers. We didn't think we'd move away from classic news consumption patterns. And perhaps my favorite stat of all, only 32% of those who go online say they would miss it a lot if no longer available. Fast forward 10 years and half of the US population was online. Fast forward 20 years past that to where we are today, and none of us could imagine a world that wasn't fully digital. None of us could imagine doing our taxes anywhere but online, ordering groceries online, ordering a cab online. We are a fully digital society, and back in 1995, we couldn't imagine that. Now, I like to think that we're sort of in the 1995 era of AI. We're getting past that, but there is a percentage of people who are still incredibly skeptical that it's going to change the world as we know it. And if I invite you to do anything today, it's to be on the side of the room that truly can see past that skepticism, and that is truly excited about the innovations that AI will bring. And I suspect you are those people, because otherwise, why would you be here? So really, I think we are moving past an era of information into an era of intelligence. This is what Sam Altman says we're heading into, the age of intelligence. And this is an age in which expertise, which classically has only been concentrated in humans, is now available outside of humans. And if we can all of a sudden access expertise freely in a democratized way, it changes fundamental dynamics of how work gets done. And that is very exciting. But we have to unlock all of this, right? We're all here to learn, well, how can we do this? If we can access this intelligence suddenly, how do we use it? If we're in the age of intelligence, what does that mean for us? And so this is the research roadmap that we put together to try to understand this. So I'm going to take you through some brief research findings for each of these. I don't have a lot of time. A lot of this is available in our research publications, which we can share with you. But I want to talk a little bit about adoption and why that phase is really important. And then we're going to move into behavioral change. And then finally, we're going to talk about work pattern transformation. Now, with adoption, I'm going to keep it brief. And the primary point I want to make here is that this is the worst AI will ever be. And that is a pretty incredible thought, because AI is pretty good for having only really been in its current form here for 2 years. Right? And I think we're going to see it change over time. We're going to see it evolve into different shapes and forms. Right now, for most of us, it's showing up as a personal assistant. And in this era, it's helping you do the things you do now, but better and faster. It's helping you write emails better and faster. It's helping you create first drafts better and faster. And that is a tremendous thing. Right? If we can improve everyone's productivity, if we can give everyone a universal productivity uplift, that on its own has big implications for organizations, for societies, for economies. But it's not always going to stay like this, because AI is also going to show up as a new team member. For those of you who are interested in research, Harvard just released an amazing paper called the Cybernetic Teammate, and it's all about how equipping individuals with AI essentially allows them to perform at the levels of a team. In this era, essentially, AI is giving you a net new skill. It's not just letting you do the same things you do better and faster, it's allowing you to do net new things. So as an example, I cannot play a musical instrument. My mother tried, trust me. But imagine a world in which now I can go to an AI music generator and I can say, I know exactly what the song sounds like that I want to create. I know what the lyrics would be. I know what vibe it would be. I know it would be kind of probably like Taylor Swift adjacent. And I would say that to an AI music generator, and it would create a song for me. I now essentially have hired a musician to be part of my team. And to allow people to do net new things is a pretty incredible evolution. It's not just going to stay a team member, it's going to become an agent as well. And so if personal assistant is about doing the same things better, and team member is about allowing you to do net new things, agents is taking things off your plate. Agents are operating autonomously. And this is very scary for a lot of us, right? but I can promise you we are not going to run out of work. There will always be work for humans to do. That is what history teaches us. And to be honest, information work today is a mess. We spend way too much time on email, we spend way too much time on meetings, and in a world in which we can automate a lot of that, and we can have agents do end-to-end processes autonomously, it creates huge ripple effects for organizations. And it creates new roles and jobs as well. You know, imagine a role that is solely concentrated on managing agents, an agent manager. That is a very real possibility. We're going to need that. We're going to be creating a lot of agents. We're going to need the human capability to provide oversight and management and measurement. So my key takeaway for you in this adoption phase is please don't focus solely on AI as a personal assistant. This is the worst AI will ever be. Think big picture, long term, and really drive that messaging throughout your organization. Okay, behavioral change and usage. I'm going to spare you. Usually when I do this talk and I have longer, I ask everyone at the front to stand up and switch seats with everyone at the back. And inevitably, people look at me with real pain. So I'm going to ask you to do that. The exercise that I do that for is because change is hard. We are neurologically programmed to resist change. Right now, you have selected your seat. This is your predictable seat for the next hour. You know who's to your left, you know who's to your right, you know where the breeze is coming in, and you don't want to change. You are safe in your seat. And this is what we have to be aware of when we introduce new tools and technology. We are hardwired to resist change. But we also know that change is where growth comes from, that is how we evolve, and that is how we develop. So we literally did an experiment within Microsoft. We took a team at Microsoft led by an individual called Jared Spataro, who you should all follow. He's a brilliant thinker. He runs a team of 300 people at Microsoft, and we took those 300 people and we divided them in two. And half got a series of interventions, things like leadership communications. Every Monday, we had a leader send them an email. Virtual workshops every Wednesday. We held demos, promptathons. We did a full on-site co-pilot day where we brought everyone from that group together and did live experimentation. And we had a dedicated Teams chat. So loads of interventions that we thought would drive usage. The other group didn't get anything. They were quite annoyed, to be honest with you. And then we looked, after 6 weeks, what results could we see? And for the first part, it was a successful experiment. We saw a boost in 60% of usage, which, by the way, is a pretty incredible number for a team at Microsoft who are incentivized to use Copilot. Like, Jared's team usage was high already. So to be able to drive it upwards even more was a result. We were able to increase the number of power users, and then we saw great sentiment. But this is the really interesting stuff, which is the difference between the control and the treated group. And you can see all the spikes that occur, right, after every intervention. The one that I'm most interested in is the Tuesday spike. Because what we were doing on Mondays was sending out LT comms, right, sending out leadership communications. And if we saw this spike on Tuesdays, that suggests that it was working and that people really listen to their leaders. And that was our first key takeaway. Leadership signals matter. What you role model and how you tell people to use the tools that are given to them has a huge effect. The other thing we saw was that experimentation was really important. That was what Copilot Day was all about. Copilot right now, it's used individually in your own setting, and it can often feel quite frustrating if you don't get it right. So to be able to pull people in a room together so they can fail together and try again really unlocked a huge amount of learning. So please do promptathons, please do on-site days. They're incredibly helpful. The final two were all about power users. And what was really interesting about power users is we saw that power users are more likely to tell other people about Copilot and much more likely to learn from other people about Copilot. So you should be targeting them. We need to make more power users. But there's an interesting wrinkle here, which was we looked at power users in two ways. First, we had some objective criteria. Do you use Copilot a certain amount of times a week? Do you use it across different types of apps? Do you save a lot of time using it? But then we had subjective criteria. One question, would you consider yourself a power user? Now, there was a group of people who objectively could be considered power users. But when we asked them, would you consider yourself a power user? They said no. And this group was very interesting to us, because if they don't think they're power users, they're not going out and advocating for Copilot and evangelizing it. So we did a little focus group with them, And what they told us was, well, I can't possibly be a power user because I don't get it right on the first prompt. And this really led us to launch a campaign that was about the difference between command-based technology and conversation-based technology. And the most effective way I have found to communicate this is through this example. Probably wondering why there are 2 coffee cups up here on the screen. It is the difference essentially between every morning going down and getting your coffee through your coffee machine, pressing the pre-configured setting, the button, getting the coffee, only the coffee doesn't come. Right? The machine has failed you. You issued it a command, and it didn't deliver the coffee. It had one job. You're probably going to throw the coffee machine out. Compare that to when you go to a cafe and you ask a barista, I would like, a more complex coffee, a soy latte, and the barista gives you an oat flat white. You're going to be wondering, well, was it something I said? Or was it the way that the barista interpreted it? And that is the difference between command-based technology and conversation-based technology. We have been hardwired to think that anything that presents as a search box is a search engine. And Copilot is not a search engine. It is not a command-based tool. It is a conversation-based tool, and we need to be treating it as such. It needs context. It needs you to iterate with it. So, coffee machine versus barista. Hopefully that's an easy one to remember. All right, our final big stage here, work pattern transformation. Okay, so you've changed behaviors, you've formed new habits, and now you need to look at, well, what is happening within the world of work? There's another stage on this slide that is impact, but I didn't have enough time to talk about it, and I also know that the following speaker will cover that. So we're just going to talk about work pattern transformation here. This is the study I'm probably proudest of in my career. This is a very big undertaking for Microsoft. We partnered with over 50 Copilot customers, some of you in the room, so thank you. And we studied 6,000 employees over a period of 9 months. Essentially, what we did is what's called a randomized control trial, or an RCT. And in this, we allocate Copilot randomly to a group of people, and then we study a control group, people who don't have access to Copilot. It's the most scientific way of studying any sort of new technology. It's what pharmaceutical companies use to study the effect of drugs. And then we just sat back. We didn't intervene. We just observed. We just wanted to look at what are the differences in patterns. And we saw some really interesting things. First, we looked at email. Email was the place we saw the single biggest consensus across all the companies, a significant reduction in time spent on email, effects that were so large that it even surprised me, to the point where I would not be so surprised if in a couple of years none of us are in our inboxes, and instead we log on to our laptop and an agent taps us on the shoulder and tells us, this is what you need to know from your inbox. The second place we looked at was collaboration. Now, we wanted to make sure that human-to-AI collaboration does not come at the expense of human-to-human collaboration. Because you know what's so important about human-to-human collaboration? Friction. The fact that someone disagrees with you is the single most important part of collaboration. And AI isn't always going to disagree with you. AI is here to make your life better. So we need to preserve human-to-human collaboration as we are getting better at human-to-AI collaboration. And thankfully, we saw this. We saw a boost in creation. We saw a boost in collaboration. And this was very promising to us. We hypothesized that a lot of the time saved on email was funneled into these collaborative creation-type activities. Meetings. Meetings is everyone's biggest pain. Now, I've included the attractive statistics up here, but there was no real consensus on meetings. Some companies had decreases in time spent in meetings, some had increases. This is entirely dependent on your meetings culture. AI can't fix your meetings culture. You have to fix that culture. But the piece that I found fascinating was really this idea about what does a meeting become for? And I'm going to share with you one example of a company that was part of this study that shared a story that really struck me. So this company had some strange meetings metrics. We got them on the phone. We asked them, what's going on here? They told us they had given Copilot to a team of white paper authors. This is a chemical engineering company. The job of these white paper authors is every time that they release a new product, these authors have to write a paper breaking down the chemistry components of the product. The way they used to do this was every specialist would write up their section, send it to the next specialist, write up their section, and so on and so on. Very long, arduous, painful process. When they got Copilot, all the specialists got onto a call and wrote the paper out loud. And by that I mean each specialist would say, this is what I want to be in my section. Together they would discuss the abstract and the conclusion, and then they would hand the transcript to Copilot, and Copilot would write up the first draft. Now, this company estimates that for every paper they produce, they've now saved 10 hours. And more importantly, they've saved a lot of pain. And that really excited me, because imagine a world in which meetings become about value creation and not just passive information exchange. And it's kind of almost full circle, right? All the way back to the very first way that we used information, which was to express it verbally, right around the fire, right? That's what we are moving towards now. We're moving towards an era of dialogues, not documents. And we should be excited about that. So, hopefully this has given you all a little bit of a taster of the type of work we do, and hopefully some practical insights that you can take away from this around adoption, behavioral change, and of course, finally, work pattern transformation. If I leave you with anything else today, because you've got some exciting sessions ahead of you, and I don't want you to forget mine, it's really, the world is made up of assumptions about how we work and who we are, and I think it's a very dangerous thing to rely on assumptions about the past in order to create the future. And AI is forcing a conversation about a lot of the assumptions we have about work. And so I'd like, as a closing thought, to invite you to join me in an exercise. I'm not going to ask you to get up, don't worry, where you really think deeply about an era of work in which we didn't have anything. This is the first day in the history of work. We didn't have meetings, we don't have an office. This is the first day in the history of work. How would you design how you work? Thank you so much for your time.